Torn by Two Alphas. A Werewolf Shifter Romance Audiobook. Written by Rain Hart. Chapter 1. The Procession of Silence. The snow had no right to be this soft. It fell in delicate spirals, silent as breath, layering the ground in a silvery shroud that gleamed beneath the weight of twin moons. Even her footsteps, barefoot, red raw, left no trace. As if the land itself refused to remember her. Evienne Thorwell didn't remember how long she had been kneeling. Her knees had long since gone numb, the thin silk of her ceremonial gown soaked through with cold. A single droplet slid from her temple, not sweat, not tear, just the melt from a snowflake that had landed, lingered, and died. Beside her, the other body didn't melt. It lay crumpled in the snow like discarded meat, stripped of dignity, skinless from collarbone to ankle. The scent of iron clung to the air despite the cold. No one moved to cover it. No one mourned. That was what happened to offerings that shivered. The clinking of armor in rhythm announced the approach of the procession. Half-wolf soldiers in black steel stepped from the mists like something summoned. Not one spared her a look. They only parted like water as a robed man passed between them, High Priest Alden, carrying the seal of Duskwatch Hollow in one gloved hand and a white veil in the other. "You will not speak," he said without stopping. "You will not raise your eyes. You will not fall." Evienne said nothing. Her tongue was stuck to the roof of her mouth anyway. A tether was looped around her wrists. She did not resist as they pulled her to her feet. One of the soldiers, older than the rest, gave her a brief glance. She couldn't decide if it was pity or revulsion in his eyes. It didn't matter. They hoisted her into the ritual cart, whitewood carved with clawed runes, and locked the veil in place. It obscured her vision entirely, but the cold told her she had left the outer lands. She could feel the difference in the air. The scent was sharper now, ash, old stone, dominance. She flinched as Mara settled beside her. "Don't look at them," the girl whispered behind a breath. "They don't think we're real." Evienne's voice wouldn't come. She focused on the vibration of wheels over ice, the hush of boots pacing the sides of her carriage. She didn't need sight to know where they were going. Every human knew. Duskwatch Hollow was where names went to vanish. The journey passed in cold and silence, the veil damp against her lips. Eventually, they stopped. She was pulled forward by the tether until the world tilted and her knees hit smooth stone. The impact sent a jolt up her spine, but she didn't cry out. The veil was lifted. And for the first time, Evienne saw the moonbind hall. It was not a hall at all, but a vast amphitheater of obsidian and pale light. The ground rippled with inlaid symbols she did not recognize, old and aching. Above, the moons burned blue and red through a fractured ceiling. Wolves lined the steps. Not beasts, men. Tall. Silent. Watching. The tether dragged her forward again. She was led to the center of the hall where a black stone platform rose from the floor. Upon it stood three figures, High Priest Alden, Elder Marin, and him. Darius Failer. The Wolf King. He wore no crown. No cloak. Just layered black and silver, his shoulders squared, his gaze fixed on nothing in particular. He did not look at her. A voice echoed in the chamber, but it wasn't his. Alden spoke the vows in the old tongue. Words carved from bone and ritual, promising her womb, her loyalty, her silence. Evienne swallowed blood. Her knees burned. When the time came to respond, her voice caught. Alden paused. The silence stretched long enough that she heard someone chuckle on the upper tier. Darius turned. And finally, he looked at her. He did not speak. He didn't need to. His eyes, ancient, glacial, gray as dead ash, met hers with nothing behind them. Then he descended. The steps beneath his boots made no sound. When he reached her, she instinctively bowed her head. Her fingers trembled. He passed by without stopping. The edge of his cloak brushed her knuckles. And with a voice as cold as snowmelt, he said, "Don't die at my feet." Not yet. The ceremony ended. Evienne didn't remember the walk to her new quarters. She remembered only the stone under her palms, the laughter echoing off walls as someone whispered, another one to last a week at best, and Mara's hands wrapping her in furs that smelled of wolf and dampness. Her chamber was bare. Walls of unpolished stone, one small brazier sputtering blue light. The bed was stiff. The silence worse. Mara left before moonrise. She did not light another candle. Evienne sat in the dark, her knees drawn to her chest, and let the cold slip back into her bones. She didn't sleep. But she must have drifted, because the whisper came not with a knock, but like breath behind her skin. It was not Darius's voice. "You finally came." It echoed not in her ears, but somewhere deeper, as though her blood could hear. Evienne gasped. Her body curled inward on instinct, her skin prickling. The air felt thinner. Her breath hitched. The voice again, lower now. Closer. "I've waited so long to feel you again." She saw it, not in front of her, but behind her closed lids, a figure in red moonlight, bare from the waist up, blood on his hands, wild eyes fixed on her through some ancient bond. And when she opened her mouth, the word that nearly escaped was not Darius, but... Chapter 2, The King's Color. The day began with bells that did not ring. Instead, it was the low, thrumming beat of a war drum beneath the stone that woke Evienne, a rhythm pulsing from the very bones of the palace. It beat through the walls, through the cold tiles under her feet, through the hollow ache in her limbs. She sat in silence, spine straight, waiting. When Mara entered with a folded dress and lowered eyes, Evienne did not speak. "You're to be brought before the court," Mara said simply. The collar ceremony. The gown was slate-gray silk with sheer sleeves that showed more skin than it hid. Mara fastened it carefully at the throat and did not meet her gaze again until she reached for a small box carved from bone and wolf's teeth. Evienne had seen such boxes only in stories. Mara opened it slowly and removed the collar within. A slender band of iron, dark with old magic, glinted faintly in the candlelight. There was no clasp, only a seam of runes that pulsed faint blue. "It will burn for a moment," Mara murmured. Evienne didn't move. Her breath trembled in her lungs, but she tilted her chin up. Mara paused. "Do you want me to stay when they—" "No," Evienne said, voice barely audible. "No one should have to watch." She was escorted to the throne hall under armed guard. Her veil had been removed, but the cold wind that blew through the open corridor made her feel as bare as the day she was born. The guards did not speak to her. One flinched when her arm accidentally brushed his. The moonbined throne hall was fuller than the day before. Dozens of wolves lined the obsidian tiers, some draped in silver-trimmed coats of rank, others in ceremonial armor. The scent of dominance coiled in the air like smoke. Evienne stepped barefoot across the stone circle, escorted by Commander Rhys Calderon, whose eyes never left the space in front of him. She could feel them on her, those wolves. Watching her movements. Assessing her body. Her worth. She had never hated her thinness until now. At the top of the steps sat Darius Vaylor, Wolf King of Duskwatch, sharp and motionless on his throne as if he had been carved there. A great fur mantle hung from one shoulder, black on black, making his frame seem even broader. His gaze swept the chamber once, and then he stood. "Bring her forward." The voice was colder than the snow she'd once knelt in. She moved when Rhys touched her back, barely. At the foot of the dais, she dropped to her knees. It was not required, not spoken, but it was expected. Darius descended only 3 steps and stopped before her, holding the collar between his hands. He did not offer words. Instead, he reached for her throat. She did not resist. She only flinched once, when his fingertips brushed the line where her heartbeat trembled beneath her skin. The iron was colder than she expected. It kissed her collarbones as it slid into place. When it sealed, the runes flared, and a sharp pain shot through the back of her skull, down her spine, into her core. Her breath hitched. The pain was intimate. Invasive. Like someone had pried open her ribs to write their name on the inside. She did not scream. But she saw, in the crowd, a woman smile. Ira Valebrook. Tall. Pale. Regal as a blade left in winter. She leaned forward slightly on the tier above and said, "Clear enough for all to hear. The king accepts a trembling rabbit? She can barely stand. How will she climb his bed?" The court rustled with quiet amusement. Darius did not move. Evienne's ears burned. Her fingers curled against the stone. She felt Darius shift behind her, the movement a mere breath. Then he spoke. "Bring the cold fire." The chamber fell silent. A silver goblet was placed in his hand. The liquid inside shimmered with a pale blue flame. Evienne knew the stories. Cold fire severed unstable bonds, numbed spirit thrumming. It was a suppressant. A leash made of smoke and silence. Darius knelt before her. The crowd stilled. "Open your mouth," he said softly. She hesitated. His fingers found her jaw, tilting it up, and pressed until her lips parted. He poured the elixir slowly, deliberately. It burned like ice down her throat. Her chest seized. "Swallow." The word left no room for disobedience. She obeyed. Tears stung her eyes, unbidden. Darius stood, wiping his hand on a silk cloth as if he had touched something unclean. The collar glowed for a moment, then dulled. He returned to his throne. "She is mine," he said to the court. Bound. Contained. Evienne heard no applause. They led her from the hall like a trained dog. In the garden afterward, where frost clung to dead ivy and the stones offered no warmth, she doubled over beside a withered bench and vomited. Mara found her like that. "I told you not to eat anything he offers," Mara whispered, crouching beside her. Evienne wiped her mouth with the back of her sleeve. Her hands shook. "He made me," she said. Mara pulled a cloth from her satchel and reached for her. "Here, let me." "No," Evienne flinched back. "Don't touch me." Mara froze. Her voice softened. "I only meant." Evienne looked at the ruined flowers beside the path. Her voice cracked. "Even the grass won't stay in my hands. Don't waste yours." She left the garden alone. That night, her hands found the collar in the dark. She pulled until her skin burned, then twisted the seam the wrong way, pressing the sharp runes into her throat. A sob broke from her lungs. The metal didn't yield. But she did. Eventually, she found a thin strap from her gown's inner hem, folded it tight, and looped it through the collar. It took 3 knots before the pressure was enough to blur her vision. The chamber spun. Just as her limbs went numb, the door burst open. Darius was there. No cloak. No guards. No warning. He strode across the room, tore the strap away, and gripped her wrists. She crumpled beneath him, gasping for air. His voice was low, flat. "You thought death was a choice?" His eyes were shadowed. "Hollow. I haven't given you permission to leave me yet." She didn't speak. He released her like she was something broken. And perhaps, in that moment, she was. Chapter 3. Red echoes in the wall. She dreamed of teeth. Not the clean white flash of a predator's snarl, but the slow drag of canines across her pulse, hot breath pooling at her throat. She didn't know if it was memory, illusion, or some terrible third thing that blurred the two into something far more dangerous. He was in her head. She woke with a soft gasp, her fingers clutching the edge of the sheets, her mouth parted, lips damp. The air felt heavy, warped, like the walls themselves had drawn breath and refused to exhale. The fire in the grate had gone out. Only moonlight spilled through the high windows, pooling like milk across the stone. Evienne sat up slowly. The chamber should have been silent. But it wasn't. It wasn't a sound so much as a pressure, like someone was watching her through a keyhole no one had carved. Her skin prickled. The fine hairs at her neck stood on end. She pressed a hand to her chest. There. A flutter. A pulse not her own. "Let me in." The voice brushed across her thoughts like smoke, warm, unfamiliar, but far too intimate. She staggered to her feet. "No," she whispered. But the word had no anchor. It was airless. She made it halfway to the door before her knees buckled. The moment her palms hit the cold stone, the room changed. It tilted. Not literally, but the air shifted around her, bending. She gasped as the collar around her throat grew ice cold. Her spine arched. Her mouth opened in a silent cry. Her mind fractured into sensation, heat across her skin, pressure behind her eyes, the phantom slide of someone's breath over the shell of her ear. "You remember me." She didn't know the voice. She shouldn't know the voice. But her body did. Her hands curled into fists, her forehead pressed to the ground. The cold grounded her, but her thoughts weren't her own anymore. Images struck her one after another, shadows licking stone, bare feet on crimson floors, teeth on flesh. The presence behind her was massive. Close. Too close. And yet, never touching. Her lips trembled. "Stop. I haven't touched you," the voice murmured. "Yet you burn." A knock slammed against the edge of her awareness. Real sound, this time. A shout. Her name. Mara. Then hands, real ones, were dragging her back. The voice retreated like a tide, angry and reluctant. Evienne opened her eyes and found herself in Mara's arms. The maid's face was pale with terror. "You were on the floor, saying things, your eyes weren't right." Evienne tried to speak, but her throat ached. Her breath shook. She stared at her own hands, which trembled in her lap like leaves in wind. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Moments later, a figure swept in, Dr. Lenia, hair disheveled, gown still rumpled from sleep. "She called for you," Mara said quickly. "I didn't know what to." Lenia knelt, pressing her fingers to Evienne's pulse. Her brows furrowed. "She's been touched," the healer said softly. Mara flinched. "By the king." Lenia's expression darkened. "No, not him." A pause. "Another alpha." "But he isn't here." Evienne gripped her wrist. "What does that mean?" Lenia glanced toward the shadows as if she feared they'd answer. "It means someone has begun a resonance with you from beyond the palace walls." "That's not possible." "No," Lenia agreed. "It's not." Later that night, Evienne left her chambers. She walked barefoot, wrapped in only a cloak, the collar around her throat still pulsing faintly. The guards had not stopped her. Perhaps they thought her somnambulant. Perhaps they didn't care. The shadow-wrought passage was a long, unused hall, lined with windows too narrow to slip through, but wide enough to let moonlight pour in. It carved the edge of the east tower like a spine, winding up toward the Dreamwell chamber. She followed the light. Every breath was heavier than the last. At the corridor's end, she stopped. Someone stood there. Not a hallucination. Not a dream. A man. Barefoot. Shirtless. Lean muscle carved into angles of tension. Hair wild and dark. Eyes aglow like twin fires banked in snow. He did not speak. He didn't have to. Evienne pressed a trembling hand to the wall for balance. "You shouldn't be here." He smiled. Slow. Not cruel, but not kind. "I'm not," Lucien Dreven said softly. "Not really." Her knees threatened to buckle. He stepped no closer. His presence didn't need to. It wrapped around her, coiled in the space between skin and air, threading through the bond she hadn't meant to awaken. "I didn't choose this," she whispered. "No," he said. "But you felt it." Evienne clenched her jaw. Her heartbeat raced. The wall behind her was solid. The air between them was not. "I won't be chained again." Lucien tilted his head. "I don't want to chain you," he said. "I want to burn with you." She shook her head, but her hands betrayed her, clenching the cloak tighter as if it could hold back the way her body trembled. "You think he marked you," Lucien said, voice rougher now. "But that's not a bond. That's a muzzle." She gasped. He leaned just slightly into the moonlight, shadows dancing across the defined lines of his chest. There were old scars there. Some clawed. Some bitten. A history etched in flesh. "I won't leash you," he said. "But I will consume every part of you you've tried to hide." Evienne's breath stuttered. Lucien's gaze dropped to her lips. Then, slowly, to her collar. "He used iron," he murmured. "I would have used breath." He turned. She sagged against the wall, vision blurring. "Wait." He didn't look back. He said only, "Next time, don't invite me if you're not ready." Then he vanished into the shadows as if he'd never been there at all. Evienne stumbled back to her room, her legs leaden. Her skin hummed. Her mouth was dry. She collapsed to her knees at the foot of her bed. And when she finally looked down, she saw it. A faint red mark in the center of her palm. She hadn't bled. Nothing had touched her. But the mark glowed softly, like something had been left there. Impressed. Claimed. She pressed her trembling fingers to it. 2 alphas. 2 flames. One body that no longer obeyed its own master. Chapter 4. The Howl of Witnesses. The saltstone forum glistened like a frozen amphitheater, tiered with pale gray rock and silver-veined ice. Duskwatch's moons hung above in cruel silence, twin eyes bearing witness. The wolves had gathered, alphas cloaked in fur and frost, their breath clouding in the air as if the hollow itself exhaled with their presence. All eyes were fixed on the center, where a single stone altar waited, stained with the memory of pledges made and blood spilled. Evienne stood at its base. Her knees touched the frost-etched stone. The ceremonial robe they'd draped her in was thin as gauze, its edges trailing like smoke in the wind. The collar on her throat gleamed dully, a chain threaded through its ring and anchored to the altar's base, not to restrain, but to remind. Darius stood behind her, silent and still as a statue carved from storm. Before her, Elder Marin raised a hand. Let it be known, his voice echoed through the forum, that the human offering has been brought forth for the loyalty trial, in full sight of the Alpha Circle. She did not look up. She didn't need to. She could feel them, their disdain sharp as icicles, their curiosity hungrier than fangs. Dozens of alphas arrayed in a crescent, sitting above like a tribunal of gods. Marin continued. By our right, she shall drink of the blood wine, cold forged with moon ice and bound with the blood of our king. She shall take it with her body bared to the hollow, her soul bound in obedience, and her oath sealed in frost. Someone scoffed from the right tier. Look at her. She trembles already. Another voice, rougher, mocking, cut through the cold. If the mere cup frightens her, how will she bear his mark? Darius did not speak. Evienne kept her gaze low as the goblet was brought forth. Rhys Calderon held it, wrapped in black leather gloves, his expression impassive as ever. He offered it to her with one knee to the ground, as though presenting a weapon. She reached out with trembling hands. The goblet was freezing. Her fingers barely wrapped around it before numbness seeped in. The wine inside shimmered dark crimson, threaded faintly with silver. Alpha blood. Her lips parted, hovering above the rim. The scent of iron and frost hit her first. Her chest seized. She hesitated. Drink, Marin said, voice cold and expectant. The murmur stirred again, sharper this time. She resists. She hesitates. She defies. The metal kissed her lip. Her hands shook. Behind her, Darius shifted. Not a step, not a breath, just enough for the chain to tighten ever so slightly, the message clear. She drank. The first sip burned her tongue. Not with heat, but with something older, deeper, a taste of winter born not from season but from lineage. A part of her rebelled. Her spine arched, her throat convulsing. She swallowed hard. The wine slipped past her lips, down her chin. It stained her robe like blood from a wound. A gasp broke from her. The goblet fell. Her hands clutched at her chest. The cold sank in with a vengeance. Her limbs twisted, jerking against her will. She collapsed. The altar cracked beneath her weight as her body convulsed. Her eyes rolled back. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. She heard nothing, only the roar of wind inside her skull, the pressure of something vast and terrible pulling at the threads of her mind. Not Darius. Lucien. Not his voice, but his pull, the echo of him like fire beneath her skin. Her body didn't recognize this new bond. It cried out for the old one. The one she had never consented to, but could no longer escape. Seizure, someone barked. No, Alden's voice cut through. Rejection. Chaos erupted. She saw flashes, alphas rising from their seats, growls tearing the air, Darius's shadow falling over her like a storm cloud. Then, stillness. Darius knelt beside her. His hand came to her face, not gentle, firm. "Icy. Let them see what you are," he whispered. "But if you ever let your body disobey me again." His fingers traced the edge of her jaw, then closed around her throat. Not tight. Just there. "I will strip you of it." Darkness swallowed her. In sleep, she did not dream. She fell. Through ice. Through memory. Through the scent of ash and red. And then, heat. A mouth at her throat. Breath like fire over her collarbones. A voice low and wild, vibrating through her bones. "You called me. So I came." Lucien. His body was above hers, shadow and fury and desire. His teeth pressed to her throat, but did not break skin. "You can't serve two kings," he growled, lips dragging down her neck. "So choose." She whimpered. He bit. She woke. The room was wrong. She was on stone, not the altar. Her knees scraped. Her body trembled. And her throat. She raised a hand. Her collar lay broken beside her, the chain snapped. Blood welled beneath a set of very real teeth marks just above her shoulder. She stared at it, then down at her robe, where droplets of blood had bloomed like roses in snow. She crawled backwards, her back hitting the corner of the chamber wall, heart slamming against her ribs like it wanted out. Lucien had touched her. Not in flesh. Not fully. But enough. Her body had betrayed the hollow. Betrayed the king. And it was only just beginning. Chapter 5, A Bed Unshared. He did not touch her. He didn't have to. Darius's command had been clear. "She sleeps in my bed. Tonight. Unclothed. No reason. No explanation. Just a dismissal wave of his hand as he strode past Reese and Mara, leaving them in the hall to exchange brief, alarmed glances. Evienne had not spoken. Not when the guards led her into the steaming bath hall. Not when Mara, hands trembling, unpinned her robe and let it slip to the floor. Not even when her hair was braided and the iron collar wiped clean of dried blood. She had only spoken once. "Will he be there?" Mara had not answered. Her eyes had flicked away, as if even looking too long might burn her. Now, the Wolf King's chamber loomed around her like the ribcage of some ancient beast. Vaulted ceilings of blackstone, bare save for one iron-ringed chandelier. A writing desk near the fire, cluttered with old scrolls and crystal ink jars. One balcony door slightly ajar, letting in the cold like a whisper. And in the center, his bed. Furs and pelts, mostly dark, mounted on a low platform of stone carved into the wall. No posts. No canopy. No softness, save the pelts. "Lie down," he said without looking at her. He stood by the desk, turning a page with one long finger, back straight, posture relaxed. As if this were any other night, and she were not a trembling creature bare to the bone, barely healed from a failed binding. Evienne stood frozen, her arms clutched over her chest. Her voice broke. "Please." He turned a single page. She stepped closer to the bed, her knees locking with each pace. The furs rustled beneath her as she sank into them, side-lying as he'd commanded. The cold of the room clung to her skin, raising goose flesh over her thighs and spine. She curled her legs. "Tight." "Uncurl," Darius said, still without looking. Her breath stuttered. The chain from her collar gave a small tug, fastened now to the bed's corner post, short enough that she couldn't roll away. Her hands trembled as she stretched out, one arm beneath her head, the other flat against the pelts. Her back to him. Her heart pounded so loud she thought it might echo. Time passed. Minutes bled into hours. He did not move. He did not speak. Only the scratch of his pen now and then, the sound of him refilling ink. A chair creaked. He drank something cold and metallic-smelling, blood wine, maybe. And still, she lay there. Entirely exposed, save her hair and the thin chain across her throat. Her body began to react. It wasn't arousal. Not truly. It was a burn. A prickling, restless ache under her skin. Her muscles twitched. Her lips trembled with the effort not to speak again. But the worst was the pull, that pull, beneath her ribs. A silver-threaded yearning tugging from some unseen place just beyond the edge of thought. Lucien. Somewhere out there, his soul still called to hers. Faint. Fractured. But present. It twisted inside her like hunger. And it made her wrong. She clenched her jaw, shifting minutely beneath the furs. Her bare thigh brushed a cooler spot, and she gasped, too loud. Be still. His voice cracked through the air like frost over water. She stilled. Tears burned in her eyes, unspilled. A whimper rose in her throat and died. She didn't know how long it had been. Her body had gone beyond cold now, into something sluggish, half-numb, but somehow still hyper-aware. She could feel every thread of fur under her skin, every knot in the stone beneath, every breath he took at the desk behind her. She turned her face into the bedding and whispered, "Why are you doing this?" No answer. Another hour passed. The moons shifted outside, beams of their twin light tracing along the wall. A gust from the cracked balcony door swept cold across her back like a blade. She curled again without thinking, drawing her knees up in a tremble. The chain pulled taut. Her back arched in pain. She whimpered again. Please, please let me go." He said nothing. Only the sound of another page turned. Her control shattered. "Please," she sobbed. "Just look at me. I don't want to be between you. I don't want to be anything." She heard the chair slide. Then silence. Then footfalls. Measured. Heavy. Inevitable. She didn't dare move as he came around the side of the bed. His boots stopped inches from her spine. She shivered. Fingers touched her hair. Gently, almost reverent. A caress. Then, her chin was seized. He tilted her face toward him, grip firm and cold. At last, he looked at her. But there was no warmth in his gaze. "I do not need a creature that begs." Her breath caught. "I need one that obeys." His thumb pressed into her lower lip, tracing the corner of her mouth. "You are not torn. You are claimed." He released her, turned away, and returned to the desk. She lay there stunned. The imprint of his hand burned against her jaw. She no longer cried. She couldn't. Somewhere deep inside, something had cracked. She waited. And when the moons began to fade behind the high ridge cliffs, she moved. The chain clinked softly as she unhooked it. He had left it unfastened. Had he meant to? Did he want her to run? She didn't care. She slid from the bed. The furs clung to her skin, cold and heavy. She wrapped them around herself as best she could and crept to the balcony. The wind bit her. The stone beneath her feet was slick with frost. She stepped to the edge. Below her, the cliffs dropped into nothing. A sea of jagged rock and mist far below. She stepped forward, but a hand closed around her waist, yanked her back, spun her, shoved her against the wall. She gasped, his body pressed into hers, the cold stone biting her bare spine, the pelts dropping uselessly to the floor. His eyes were inches from hers, blazing. "Try that again," Darius said, voice low, furious. "And I will make sure you never dream again." His forehead pressed to hers. His breath was ice and smoke. His hand stayed at her waist. He did not let her fall. He would not let her leave. But neither would he let her go. Chapter 6: The Wild Between Us. The wind carried his voice like a promise sharpened to a blade. Evienne had heard it before, faint, almost imagined, just beneath the howl of the hollow's eternal dusk winds. But tonight, it threaded through the ivy-choked ruins of Pale Stone Garden like a command wrapped in longing. She should have turned away. Should have buried herself deeper in the stone-chilled blankets of the sanctum, ignored the pull. Instead, barefoot and sleepless, she stepped into the dead ivy paths. The garden lay in ruin, swallowed by ash-rooted vines and time-blackened walls. Pale moonlight cut through the broken archways, silvering her skin as she walked. Her breath trembled against the air, fogging the night. A breeze stirred, cold, insistent, and in it came the low hum of a voice not spoken aloud. Evienne. She froze. The voice wasn't near. It was inside. Her hands clenched around the fabric of her shift as she stepped closer to the collapsed southern wing, its stones veined with ghost root and frost moss. The world felt hushed, pressed inward. With each step, her thoughts turned muddy slow. The shadows sharpened. Something brushed her shoulder, nothing there. Her pulse rose. Then, "I told you," came the voice, deeper now, rougher, closer. "You can't run from me." She spun. No one. But the world twisted. A breath, warm, unmistakable, ghosted down her neck. Her knees buckled. She braced against the ancient wall, vines biting into her palms. The ground shifted beneath her, not physically, but within, as if her very bones remembered something her mind could not hold. Lucien. His presence surged, not in flesh, but in the way her skin burned, the way her back arched unbidden, the way air dragged into her lungs like it didn't belong to her anymore. A phantom weight pressed her down, and though she saw nothing, her body knew, responded. "No," she whispered. But it wasn't her voice that answered. His was inside her, a whisper curled behind her teeth, riding her heartbeat. The bond, fractured but not broken, surged like wildfire through the cracks. She clenched her thighs, trembled as a pulse of sensation gripped her lower spine, blooming outward with humiliating precision. "You ache," he murmured, though his mouth was nowhere near. Even now. She shook her head violently. "Stop." Fingers of air curled around her wrists, invisible but there. She collapsed onto the ruined floor, dead ivy crinkling beneath her as unseen force pulled her flat. Her shift bunched at her hips. A breath, not hers, slid between her thighs like a question she had no strength to deny. The scent of him, pine, wild smoke, blood heat, flooded her lungs. She cried out. Shame lit her face. She thrashed, but not out of fear. Not fully. Her body betrayed her, every nerve tuned to a touch that didn't exist in the world she could see. "You're mine," Lucien whispered, voice hot against the shell of her ear. "And you want to be?" "No," she gasped, nails scraping stone. "No, The pressure intensified. His spirit body, his will, moved against her like a tide beneath skin. He didn't need hands. He was the tremor in her muscles, the heat in her core, the broken moan forced from her lips. Then suddenly, "Evienne." Mara's voice. Real, sharp, like cold water. The spell fractured. Evienne collapsed sideways as if a puppet cut from its strings, her shift half torn, breath coming in strangled sobs. Her body still trembled with aftershocks. Mara stood over her, eyes wide with horror, skirts tangled in frost-laced vines. "Who did this?" she whispered, kneeling, wrapping Evienne in her cloak. Evienne's lips parted, but no words came. She clutched at the cloth, eyes unfocused, tears tracking down her cheeks. There was no one else. The garden was empty. No footprints. No scent. Just the cold and her ruin. They returned under silence and shadow, Mara casting wary glances as she half-carried Evienne through the servants' hall. The human girl didn't speak. Didn't sob. She only shivered, the echo of the phantom still locked behind her ribs. But the scent had changed. It wasn't Darius's. When they reached the threshold of the Wolf King's chamber, Evienne collapsed to her knees. The door creaked open. Darius stood there, barefoot, shirt half undone, frostlight pouring across his broad frame like a crown. His golden eyes dropped to the girl crumpled in Mara's arms. "What happened?" he asked, voice low. Mara hesitated. Then, "She was in the southern garden. I found her like this." He strode forward. The air grew taut. Evienne didn't look up. But when he neared, when his bootstep clicked against stone, her back bowed. A tremor ripped through her, visceral, helpless. A whimper broke from her lips. Not from pain. Not from fear. From the ache he hadn't given her. Darius crouched, one hand tilting her chin up. Her skin flushed, pupils blown wide. Her lips parted. He leaned closer, inhaled once. The smile that ghosted his mouth was vicious. "He's touched you," he said. "Hasn't he?" Evienne's breath hitched. "No," she choked. But her body screamed otherwise. Darius rose. "I warned you," he murmured, turning from her like she were already stripped bare. "If he marked you once, I'll erase it." She curled in on herself, arms tight around her chest. And from the shadows beyond the door, Reese stepped forward, silent as dusk, eyes unreadable. The hollow had never felt colder. Chapter 7. His to break. The fever did not break. Evienne thrashed in her silken sheets, sweat soaking through the fine linens beneath her. Her lips parted in a soundless moan as she arched against phantom hands, her fingers clutching the embroidered pillow like a lifeline. The Wolf King's chambers were dark, shuttered, save for the glow of firelight casting restless shadows across her skin. The scent of pine and cold stone clung to the air. And underneath it, the ghost of him. She whispered his name in a breath that barely broke the silence. "Lucien." A sharp crack split the quiet as a porcelain cup shattered against the stone hearth. Darius stood over her, unmoving. His gold-ringed eyes narrowed, the muscle in his jaw ticking as he stared at the fragile, writhing girl tangled in his bed. She was delirious, burning alive from within, and still, she moaned for the wolf who had no right to haunt her. Dr. Lenia's voice was low but firm. "It's the resonance. Whatever he forced upon her during their link, spiritual or otherwise, it's rooting in her nervous system. Her body doesn't know who to respond to." Darius didn't blink. "She knows. She's not awake. She still knows." Evienne gasped as a shudder rippled through her. Her back arched again, sweat sliding down the curve of her throat. The bedsheets tangled around her hips, bearing the soft paleness of her legs. Her fingers clawed at nothing, her breathing frantic. "She's reacting like she's being." "She is." Darius's voice turned to ice. Dr. Lenia paled. "She's not marked. Not fully. There's no physical bond to overwrite the resonance. If Lucien completed the spirit call..." Darius turned to her slowly. "Then I will complete what is mine." She caught his sleeve, her fingers trembling. "This isn't how you should. It's how I must." His voice did not rise. "She is howling for a ghost. I'll give her a king." He stepped forward, and the doctor did not follow. The door shut behind him with the finality of a vow. Steam rose in languid spirals from the obsidian bath. Evienne floated in the shallow waters, her shift soaked and clinging, her silver-touched skin flushed and trembling. Her hair fanned like ink across the water. Her lashes fluttered, caught in dreams she couldn't escape. The water lapped at her curves like a second mouth, and still she moaned that cursed name. Darius knelt by the bath's edge, sleeves rolled, shirt undone, shadows dancing across his bare chest. He dipped his fingers into the water and found it too hot, fevered from the fire building in her blood. "Enough," he said, not to her, but to the bond. Evienne flinched. She heard him. She always heard him. He slid into the water fully clothed, silk and leather soaking as he pressed her down by the shoulder. She gasped, head rolling. "No," she moaned, lashes fluttering. "Please, he's..." "I know who you're begging for," he whispered, lips against her temple. "And I'm going to make you forget." She trembled violently as his hand found the base of her throat, not squeezing, just holding. Her pulse thrummed beneath his fingers, wild, unsure, aroused. "You're burning because he touched your mind," he growled. "So I'll touch your body until you remember who owns it." He dragged her toward the blackstone ledge, lifting her just enough to bend her forward. Her palms slapped against the whetstone. Water dripped from her wrists, her shift plastered to her like melted silk. "Wait," she whispered, voice a thread. But her body had no resistance left. He pressed against her spine with the weight of his claim, guiding her breath, her hips, the rhythm of her surrender. It wasn't soft. It wasn't kind. It was control, sharp and clean as a blade. His fingers bit into her thigh to keep her still, his teeth grazing her neck where no mark had yet dared bloom. "You cry," he murmured in her ear, "but your body begs louder." A broken sob escaped her lips as he moved with ruthless precision, not seeking her comfort, but her obedience. She gasped when he adjusted her hips with a grip that bruised. Her forehead pressed to the stone, and still, the heat built. "You said his name," he growled, pace relentless. "Now say mine." She sobbed. Her lips parted, but no sound came. "You won't?" he whispered, cruelly soft. "Then I'll drive him from you, scream by scream." His name burned in her throat. Her own shame burned hotter. And then she broke. "Darius," she gasped. The name cracked in the air like a whip. His rhythm faltered for half a breath, then resumed harder, more punishing. She sobbed again, this time not just from sensation, but from the collapse of something sacred. The bath's obsidian echoed with the slap of flesh, the sound of water, the heat of stolen control. When it ended, she crumpled. He left her there, limp, trembling, floating in heat. Later, Evienne lay curled on the fur-covered bed, her limbs trembling. Her throat was raw. Between her thighs, the ache bloomed like crushed violets. The bite mark on her neck pulsed, half-formed, a threat more than a bond. She wept into her pillow. The door opened. She didn't look up. Darius stood in the archway, shadow-crowned, impassive. "If I ever hear you whisper his name again," his voice was low, lethal, "I'll make you kneel before the entire council and beg me to take you in front of them." The door slammed shut. She didn't stop crying. Chapter 8, Trial of the Pack. The snow had not yet melted in Wolfsworn Circle. Even as the sun pierced the edge of the ridgeline, a cold wind swept through the hollowed stone arena, its chill slipping beneath cloaks and curling between the crowd's silent mouths. Wolves gathered like shadows, some in furs, some in their second skins, watching from the ancient carved steps that ringed the trial ground. Their breaths rose like ghosts in the air. Evienne stood barefoot at the center. Her shift was pale, trembling as she was. A heavier cloak had been draped over her shoulders when they'd brought her out from the prayer cell. She clutched it now like it was armor, though it barely shielded her from the hundreds of eyes watching, judging, scenting. Ira Veilbrook's voice broke the silence like a lash. "This trial is called by scent, not by sword," she said, gliding forward in her dark robes, silver ornaments chiming from her wrists. "Evienne Thorwell is accused of spiritual defilement, consorting with a known traitor, and rejecting the mark of her chosen alpha. As such, she endangers the resonance of the pack and the sanctity of the hollow." Evienne tried not to tremble. She tasted metal at the back of her throat. Behind her, the Council of Elders observed in a cold line. Elder Marin sat highest, hands folded, eyes unreadable. Alden stood a step away from them, not quite with them, not quite against. Mara, though silent, stood at the edge of the circle, her lips pressed to a thin line. A hush fell as the ritual implement was brought forth. A gold basin, water inside laced with threads of lunar essence. "This is the circle of breath," Ira continued. "You will speak no lie within it, nor can you hide the scent of another's claim." Evienne's knees weakened. She knew what came next. "Remove your cloak," Ira said. "No," she barely whispered. But Rhys's voice followed, flat and cruel. "Do as ordered." She turned slightly, clutching the edge of her covering tighter. "Please." A flash of movement. Rhys descended the steps, strode to her side, and with a single jerk, yanked the cloak from her shoulders. The gasp from the crowd was sharp and unanimous. Evienne stood in nothing but a thin underrobe, translucent in the light. Her body was marked not with bruises, but with something far worse, the faint, lingering trace of desire, still written in scent. Her silver-touched skin flushed. Her collarbone trembled with every breath. She tried to lift her hand to her neck. "To hide what?" Rhys asked coldly. "The place he marked you? Or the way you offered it?" Evienne's mouth opened, but no sound came. She didn't know what to say, what they wanted from her. Shame was louder than thought. She tried. The wolves leaned closer. One by one, they stepped down from the circle into the arena. Sniffing. Not touching, but far too close. A dozen unmated warriors formed a ring, closing in. Not to judge her voice. To judge her scent. Evienne choked as one of them inhaled near her throat, the way a beast would draw breath at prey's nape. Her legs gave. She collapsed to her knees. "Please. Speak," said Elder Marin finally. "What remains of the exile on you?" "I don't know," she gasped. I didn't ask him to, he didn't." Tears slid down her cheeks. She didn't lift her head. She couldn't. Another came forward. This one younger. More curious than cruel. He leaned down, breathed in, and then stood with a frown. "It's old," he said. "But deep. And still present," Ira snapped. "The resonance hasn't faded. It means she accepted it willingly." Evienne sobbed, her hands clenched into the dirt. "I didn't mean to. He wasn't supposed to touch me like that. I tried. But you let him," Reese said, not unkindly now, just hollow. "Or you couldn't stop him." Evienne opened her mouth, blood on her lip where she'd bitten to keep from screaming. "I don't know how he left it," she said finally, her voice breaking. "I didn't touch him. I swear it. I didn't want." Her voice failed. And then, a new voice split the sky. "That's enough." Every head turned. A tall figure descended the stone arch at the far side of the circle. His cloak was ash gray trimmed with royal onyx, his silver crown absent, but his presence unmistakable. Darius Failer, the Wolf King. His boots crushed the frost as he approached. One step. Another. Then he shrugged off his mantle and swept it around Evienne's hunched form. Gasps echoed from the watching wolves. He looked down at her trembling figure and then turned to face the council, his gaze cold as winter steel. "My mate," he said, slow and deliberate, "is mine to judge." Marin stood. "You have no right to interfere." She was offered. Darius cut him off. She was accepted. And now she is under the protection of my vow. You did not mark her. His voice lowered to a warning growl. "Not yet." Ira's expression twisted. "Then let us see you claim her. Now. Before all." He ignored her. Instead, he leaned down to Evienne's level, one knee brushing the earth. His hand found the edge of the cloak, adjusted it to hide her bare shoulder. His breath brushed her hair. "You think I'm here to save you," he whispered. She stared up at him, lips parted, tear-streaked, barely breathing. "But I'm only here to make sure," he said, "that you belong to me." The arena exploded in murmurs. Elders rose. Wolves argued. Lines fractured. Evienne clung to the cloak like it was the last piece of her. And for the first time, she didn't feel cold. Chapter 9. The Bite Beneath the Veil. The catacombs beneath the Moonbind sanctuary breathed with old, bone-deep cold. Moisture clung to the black stone walls like a shroud, and the torches lining the descent guttered low, casting long shadows that quivered with every step. Darius said nothing as he walked ahead, his boots silent despite the echoing corridor. Behind him, Evienne followed, barefoot and trembling, the chill curling up her legs and settling in her throat. He didn't drag her, he didn't need to. The bond already pulsed in her blood, heavier since the trial, sharper after the cloak. She could still feel the heat of his body as he draped it over her shoulders in front of the entire circle, and the ice behind his smile when he whispered, "You think I'm saving you?" Now he led her deeper. Down, down, into the bowels of sacred stone. The final door groaned shut behind them. It was less a room than a sanctum carved from ancient faith, its floor etched with sigils no longer read aloud. A stone altar lay at the center, fitted with half-moon bindings and worn symbols of the old bone oaths. The smell of ash and old myrrh clung to everything. Moonlight filtered faintly from a slit above, catching the silver thread in Evienne's hair. "Strip," Darius said. She flinched. "What is this?" "Reflection," he said simply. "This is where I bring those who forget who they belong to." Her lips parted, but nothing came out. A part of her wanted to run, but her feet remained rooted. She had already been judged by the pack. Already knelt, shamed, smelled. There was nowhere left to go but into the fire. She untied the sash of her shift with fingers that barely obeyed. The fabric slid from her shoulders, whispering across her skin before pooling at her ankles. The air bit at her bare flesh. She didn't cover herself. There was no point now. Darius approached slowly, eyes raking over her, not with lust, but with possession. Reverent, cruel possession. He tilted her chin upward with one calloused finger. "Do you feel him still?" She blinked. "Who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he laid a palm over her heart, where the mate mark hadn't yet taken root, where her body still fluttered beneath his touch like something not yet claimed. "I'm going to fix that." He pressed her back against the altar, not harshly, but unyielding. Cold stone kissed her spine, and then his hands were at her hips, lifting her, laying her between the binding rings like a relic being offered. "You don't have to do this," she breathed. "No," he said. "But I want to. And so do you." She shook her head, but he was already bending over her, his mouth at her throat. He didn't bite, not yet, but his tongue traced the hollow of her neck, where Lucien's phantom touch still lived in memory. "I can still smell him," he whispered. The wildness. The defiance. But not for long. He moved with deliberate patience, shackling her wrists gently but firmly into the ancient bone slots on either side of the altar. Then her ankles. She was spread beneath him like an invocation. Moonlight painted her in ghost light, and her silver-marked skin glowed like an open wound. He unfastened his tunic, not looking at her as though he couldn't afford to. As though this wasn't desire, it was war. When he entered her, it was not with violence, but with command. Her body arched against him, not in pleasure, not in pain, but in something far more terrifying, submission. Not forced, not free. Just inevitable. Her breath shattered. His hand slid beneath her skull, lifting her just enough so his lips were near her ear. "Say it." She didn't understand. "Say who you belong to." Tears spilled from the corners of her eyes. I can't." He thrust again, harder. "Say it." "I don't know." He slowed, withdrawing, dragging her name from her mouth like a secret. "Evienne," he whispered, tasting each syllable. "You begged for death before you begged for me. Say it now." Her voice broke. "Please. Say my name and I'll end this." But he didn't stop. Not until she was trembling, throat raw from muffled sobs, thighs slick with both shame and something darker. The altar beneath her soaked it in, a silent witness to oaths older than mercy. "Darius," she finally gasped. He stilled. "Darius. Please, Darius, I'm yours." He kissed her then, not sweet, not cruel. Just certain. Like a seal being pressed into wax. And then he bit. The pain split her like a scream. Her vision whitewashed. Her soul twisted into his teeth, and her mind collapsed into darkness laced with silver fire. She fell through herself, through the binding mark, through him. Her last thought before slipping into unconsciousness was not of Darius. It was of Lucien. And he was waiting. In the dark between sleep and waking, she saw him. Lucien. Not in chains. Not in fury. But kneeling beside her, his hands cupping her face, thumbs brushing away the salt tracks of her tears. "You still feel like mine," he said, voice rougher than she remembered. "He may have your body, but I'll burn your soul before I let him have that too." She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Only blood bubbled at her lips. Lucien kissed it away. And in the blackness, fire began to crawl. Chapter 10. When the fire came crawling. The fire came not in heat, but in tremble. It crawled under her skin, beneath bone, between thought. Evienne's breath hitched as her fingers clutched at the silken sheets, soaked through with the heat of a dream she couldn't wake from. The Wolf King's chambers were still, no flicker of candlelight, no wind rattling the arched glass. Yet her body moved of its own accord, hips arching, back curling, like a creature answering an invisible call. She knew this ache. Knew the unbearable flutter deep in her womb, the pulse that wasn't hers alone. It should have been Darius. He had marked her. His bite still throbbed on her neck, healing slowly in the shape of his jaw. His scent was still burned into her skin, iron and snow and dominance. But this wasn't him. The voice in her mind didn't command. It coaxed. "Let them think you're his," it whispered, soft as snowfall. "But you know who found you first. Lucien." Her thighs tensed. Her breath caught. She turned her face into the pillow, shame staining her cheeks. It was a dream. It had to be. And yet, he didn't touch her. No ghost of him lay above her, no shadow pressed her down. But she could feel him watching, feel the raw heat in her blood quickening with his presence. Like embers stirred in ash. He murmured her name in her head like it belonged to him. Evienne. Her fingers moved, tentative, searching. She couldn't stop. Her pulse rang in her ears, and her chest heaved as the pleasure crested higher. The breathy sounds that escaped her lips were foreign, her own name barely a whisper on her tongue. Lucien didn't guide her. He didn't have to. He simply waited. And when her release broke over her, silent, violent, shameful, he murmured one final word into her soul. "Mine." She woke with a cry muffled by damp sheets. Her limbs shook. Her skin glistened with sweat, hair tangled, shift rucked up to her hips. Her wrists trembled as she reached for the edge of the bed, dragging herself upright, visions swimming. The chamber door groaned open. Darius. He stopped in the threshold, one gloved hand still on the carved handle. His hair was tousled from the wind, his cloak wet with frost. But his gaze found her in an instant, crumpled at the foot of his bed, barely dressed, breathless and bruised by something he hadn't done. And then the scent hit him. His eyes darkened to pitch. The next moment, she was on her back. He didn't yell, didn't speak, just seized her by the throat with enough force to pin her without breaking her. His other hand tore the sweat-dampened shift from her body, exposing the truth. "You let him in," he said, voice low, trembling with a rage deeper than any howl. "You let that filth inside your mind into what's mine." "No," she gasped, fingers clawing at his wrist. "I didn't want." His mouth crashed over hers, devouring the lie before she could finish it. His bite bruised. His kiss punished. He ground her into the furs with the full weight of his fury, the scent of her shame inflaming his control until it fractured. He didn't take her. He broke her. Bent her forward until her palms scraped the floor. Pressed her hips to the rug's edge until her knees ached. "Say it," he growled against her ear. She shook her head, tears falling freely. He yanked her head back by her hair, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Say it." He pushed harder, not hurting her, just commanding her, until her resistance collapsed into trembling submission. "Say who you belong to." "I don't know anymore," she sobbed. "You, him, I can't." His growl vibrated against her spine. "Then I'll remind you." And he did. With every bruising kiss, every punishing motion of his body against hers, he claimed her over and over, not in tenderness, but in dominance. He didn't need to spill himself into her. He just needed her to know, "You are mine, and you will not forget." She whispered his name, brokenly, again and again, until it no longer sounded like a word, just surrender. Finally, he stilled. Her body was limp beneath him, breath shallow. His hand rested on her hip, heavy, possessive. Her throat was raw from sobbing, her skin marked in 100 quiet ways. "You're mine," he said, quieter now. "No matter who calls you in dreams." She didn't answer. Later, the chamber was quiet. The fire had gone out. Evienne lay curled beneath a fur she hadn't drawn up herself. Darius was gone again, called to some midnight council or silent fury. He hadn't said another word. She waited until the door sealed shut behind him. Then she crawled from the bed, inch by inch, legs weak. Her stomach churned. The room tilted. She made it to the bath before the nausea overwhelmed her. Hands braced against stone, she vomited until her knees gave out. Dr. Lenia found her like that, pale and shaking, half submerged in the tub. She touched her shoulder gently. Evienne? A pause. Her hand slid from her own stomach to rest over her belly. Trembling. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know what's happening to me. Dr. Lenia's face darkened as she knelt beside her. I do. Evienne lifted red-rimmed eyes to her, lips parted. You're pregnant. The words cracked the world open. Evienne froze. No, she began, but Dr. Lenia's hand silenced her. There's more. A long breath. You carry the mark of both. You've been soulbound twice. Evienne's breath stuttered. Dr. Lenia leaned in, voice barely above a hush. You're carrying the twice-bitten child. A pause. Tell me, Evienne, do you know who the father is? Chapter 11, Womb of the Twice-Bitten. The air in the healer's den was too still. Not quiet, still, as if silence itself was bracing for what was to come. Evienne sat on the edge of the stone table, her legs dangling, the cool surface leaching warmth from her bare thighs. Her fingers were tangled in the folds of her shift, white linen now damp from her palms. The shadows of the chamber flickered, restless, as Dr. Lenia adjusted the last of the silver diagnostic rings around her wrist. They pulsed faintly, like veins of starlight threading through skin. Just breathe, the healer said gently. You'll feel a pressure here. Evienne nodded, and the moment Lenia pressed her hand to her abdomen, the pressure bloomed like a wound long hidden. The silver markings along Evienne's ribs shimmered faintly, then surged, one pulse, then another, distinct. 2. Lenia froze. Evienne's breath caught in her throat. What is it? The healer didn't answer right away. She withdrew her hand slowly, eyes fixed on the scrying pool beside the table where silver threads now danced like tangled roots. You're pregnant. Evienne's fingers loosened, fabric slipping from her grip. That's not, it's too soon. Lenia turned, her voice softer now. Evienne, there's something else. The resonance signature is bifurcated. The word didn't land. She tried to speak. Failed. Lenia, seeing her confusion, approached slowly. Your child carries spiritual markers from 2 alphas. Evienne blinked. But that's impossible, Lenia finished for her. Yes. And yet, here we are. The den felt like it tilted sideways. The low hum of the hollow's heartbeat faltered in her ears. Is it Lucien's? She asked, barely a whisper. No. It can't be. You never consummated the bond, Lenia said gently. But the spirit recognizes what the body sometimes cannot resist. And Lucien reached for you. Evienne wrapped her arms around herself. Her skin prickled as if marked anew. So, what does that make this child? Lenia looked away. A soul-born anomaly. The ancients called it a virling. A soul disaster. Before the word had finished echoing, the door burst open. Darius. He strode in without preamble, without question, without breath, like a storm summoned by fate. His eyes snapped to Lenia. Leave. The healer hesitated. Sire. Now. She left like a sigh. Darius said nothing at first. Just looked at her. At the shift clinging to her hips, the silver glow still humming beneath her skin. The scent in the air was wrong, tainted. His jaw clenched so tightly it clicked. I should have known, he murmured. Evienne flinched. Darius. You let him into your mind. Into your bond. And now you carry this aberration. Her voice cracked. I didn't let anything happen. His hands were fists at his sides. And yet it did. You are mine, Evienne. My mark. My chosen. And now you carry his corruption in your womb. Her hands moved instinctively, protectively, to her stomach. This child didn't ask to be born. You think that matters to the council? To the court? His voice was jagged. They'll see weakness. Treason. You'll be paraded, then dissected, for what grows inside you. Then let them, she snapped. But I won't let you take him from me. He stared. You won't let me? Evienne's breath hitched. He didn't choose this. I didn't choose this. You made me a vessel. Lucien made me a weapon. But he's only a child. An unstable child born of a corrupted bond, Darius growled. I'll petition the council for cleansing. Quietly. It can be done before. No, her voice sliced the space between them. You won't touch him. He advanced. 1 step. 2. His presence eclipsed the torchlight. You forget yourself, human. No, she whispered. For the first time, I remember exactly who I am. And the tears slipped down her cheek, silent, shining as if cut from moonlight. Darius froze. Her arms were shaking. She looked so small, cradling her stomach like it was her only anchor. Her hair was disheveled, lips pale, shoulders bowed, but there was steel beneath her fear. You made me this, she said. You sealed me with your bite. And now you want to unmake me because it suits your order. He looked at her for a long time, longer than was comfortable, then turned and walked to the far wall. His breath was ragged. You think I want to do this? Evienne said nothing. His voice dropped. I saw you. That night. After you screamed his name in your sleep. She closed her eyes. You trembled like it was his hands on you. And I stood there, watching, knowing I couldn't reach you. She whispered, you reached me when you punished me. Silence. I won't let you take him, she said again, quieter now. I don't care if he tears me in two. I'd rather bleed him into life than die an empty thing. The silence thickened. Then, behind them, the door creaked open. Lenia. But it wasn't her alone. High Priest Alden stepped in, flanked by a robed acolyte and the dry scent of old parchment. Your Majesty, Alden said, his voice calm as snowfall. I've heard troubling news. Darius's gaze darkened. Then you've heard lies. Alden's eyes swept to Evienne. She's with child. Darius hesitated. Evienne answered instead. Yes. The priest regarded her with unreadable stillness. And the child bears 2 echoes? She nodded. A moment passed. Then another. Alden stepped forward. Then the prophecy breathes again. Darius snarled. You told us the prophecy died with the Hollow Queen. And yet, Alden said softly, you marked a girl of silver skin. One pulled by 2 alphas. And now she carries the child of both bonds. You think that's coincidence? Evienne shivered. You stand before the twice-bitten mother, Alden said. She who bears the soul-threaded heir. And by her, the hollow shall either fall or rise anew. She couldn't breathe. Not when Alden turned to her with something close to reverence in his gaze. Not when Darius's hands trembled at his sides. And certainly not when the priest leaned in and whispered, just for her, they will all come for your blood, girl. Protect the flame, or be its pyre. Chapter 12, The Crown He Would Sew. She stood in silence as the golden causeway unfurled before her, stretched like a noose glinting in torchlight. The moonbind throne hall had never felt so cavernous. Its obsidian arches rose like ribs around her, echoing with the murmurs of wolves and courtiers gathered to witness her transformation. Not as queen, not truly, but as a bound creature, dressed for spectacle, pressed into velvet shadows. Evienne's bare feet touched the ice-veined marble, her breath catching on every step. The golden veil draped over her body was barely a gown, it was a suggestion. Threaded light. Heatless fire. It clung in all the wrong places and revealed more than it shielded. The cold bit into her collarbones, her thighs, her spine, and yet her skin burned where the fine fabric brushed against the fading marks of teeth. They stared. Every eye in the room. Men in lacquered armor. Women with painted mouths. Elders cloaked in judgment. Even the wolves, crouched at their master's feet, seemed to hold their breath. She walked anyway. At the end of the aisle, beneath the twin moon sigil carved into the throne's backdrop, Darius stood waiting in full regalia, black lacquer and moonsteel draped in a mantle of deep silver furs. His gaze, unreadable as frost, locked onto her as if daring her to flinch. She didn't. High Priest Alden began the rite, his voice rising through incense smoke and the hum of ancient runes carved into the walls. On this night of twin moons, under oath of fong and flame, we bear witness to the sanctification of bond. Let her who carries the crown be shown. Evienne's heart pounded. Not from fear. Not from shame. From something deeper, older. A memory, perhaps, of when she once believed there was still a self to protect. Darius stepped forward, and as the priest raised a ceremonial blade, the king reached out, not for her hand, but for her shoulder. "Lower it," he said softly, "for her ears alone." She hesitated. The cloth slipped. The Howl murmured. He let his fingers linger on her bare skin just above the pulse, where the first bite still lingered as a faint silver scar. Then he turned to the crowd. "This is the woman who carries my heir. Marked once by choice, twice by blood, and now a third, before the realm." Someone in the audience coughed a word. Human. Another followed. Whore. Evienne's spine locked straight. Darius heard them. All of them. His voice cut through the air like sharpened ice. "Let there be no question." Then, before gods or ghosts or council, he leaned in and sank his teeth into her shoulder. Not gently. She gasped, softly, sharply, and her knees buckled beneath her. The wound wasn't deep, but it bled enough to paint the veil down her ribs. Crimson beating gold. She kept her chin up. "Let them look. Those who doubt her may challenge the mark," Darius said. "But know this, I will answer. Fong to fong. Blood to blood." There was no movement. No challenger. Only the silent pulse of judgment, thick as incense. She stood on the moonstone dais and felt every eye like a blade. Behind her, Alden resumed the rite. Rhys stood to the side, unreadable. Elder Marin's mouth was a grim line. Ira Valebrook tilted her head with something like pity. Evienne didn't look at any of them. Not until Darius turned to face her again, placing the thin circlet, rod of lunar silver and blood iron, on her head. "You are Queen of the Hollow," he said. "No," she whispered. "I'm a vessel with a crown." His jaw tensed. "I bleed because you need me to," she continued. "But I have no throne. Only your mark." Silence. Then a sound fractured the tension. Not applause. Not assent. A howl. Low and lonely at first, then another answered, then another. Wolves stirred at the base of the causeway. Heads snapped toward the gates. Rhys stepped forward, hand on hilt. "It's the Northern Guard." Another voice shouted from the courtyard, "The exiled has returned." Evienne's heart seized. She turned too quickly. The circlet slipped sideways on her temple. The massive doors of the throne hall groaned as they began to open, wind howling through the breach like a cry loosed from the past. Darius stepped between her and the entrance, shielding her, but her body surged with something else, something unmistakable. A scent. A memory. A tether pulling tight. She gasped and stumbled back. A familiar growl rippled through the air. Claws against stone. A low, haunting snarl. Then a voice, just outside the doors. "Did you really think marking her a third time would make her yours?" The court froze. The howl became a presence. Lucien had returned. Evienne clutched the edge of the moon altar, breath shattered into shards. Her body trembled, but not from fear. From recognition. From the fire that bloomed behind her eyes like a fever reignited. And beneath her ribs, the child stirred. Chapter 13. The Alpha Without Chains. The snow parted like a veil as Lucien Dreven stepped through the gate of Moonfire, blood-soaked wool hide draped across his shoulders, the scarlet banner of his rebellion clenched in one hand. Behind him, a lone white wolf limped at his side, its fur matted with dried blood, its eyes burning like twin stars in the dusk. He wore no crown, no armor, no entourage. Only hunger. Only claim. Above the gate, sentries leaned forward in disbelief. Word rippled through Duskwatch Hollow like a storm wind snapping banners from their poles. The exiled Alpha had returned. Not with an army, but with teeth. Evienne felt it before the heralds cried out. A tremor in her sternum, like the toll of a bell only she could hear. The air thickened in the moonbind throne hall, perfumed with incense and the iron scent of silver oils, but none of it masked the sharp twist in her chest. Darius sat rigid on the obsidian throne, fingers dug into the wolf head carvings at its arms. "He wouldn't dare," he said softly. "He already has," Alden murmured, stepping away from the shadowed edge of the dais. You feel her pulse. So does he. Evienne's mouth went dry. Her palms trembled where they rested on her lap. The golden silk of her coronation robes clung to her like regret, the still fresh bite on her shoulder a beacon he would follow through fire and frost alike. And he had. Outside the walls, Lucien stopped only once, to raise his hand and speak a single name. Evienne. The syllables struck like a thunderclap. Her back arched. The breath left her lungs in a silent scream. She tumbled from the queen's perch like a puppet with strings suddenly severed. Gasps broke out. Darius surged forward to catch her before she hit the marble. He won't take you, he growled into her ear, as her fingers scrabbled blindly at his tunic. Her lips moved, forming a name. Not his. Lucien's. He heard it even across stone and crowd and time. And he smiled. The throne hall opened before him like a wound. Lucien entered without pause, his boots dragging snow and blood across the sacred floor. The wolf beside him snarled at the guards, who shrank back despite their blades. Elder Marin stepped forward with a trembling staff. This is sacrilege. Sacrilege, Lucien interrupted, was branding a soul-bond traitor because your chosen king couldn't keep her heart. Darius rose slowly, placing Evienne back into the arms of her maid. His coat shimmered with frost light, his gaze deadly calm. You're unarmed. I don't need blades to take back what you stole. He pointed at the queen, crumpled and breathless. She was mine. Before you bit her. Before you marked her like a beast claiming meat. She is not a prize, Darius spat. Then why is she in a collar? Lucien countered, voice raw. Why does her skin burn where you touched her, yet cool when I breathe her name? Evienne struggled upright. The world tilted. Between the two brothers, the air warped like heat over ice. Lucien's presence clawed at her marrow. Darius's scent pressed on her like armor. And in her core, something ancient and helpless screamed. She tried to speak. Her lips wouldn't move. Lucien's gaze snapped to her. You still ache, don't you? A sob tore from her throat. She nodded once, unable to stop the tears that followed. Darius stepped in front of her like a shield. Kneel, he said lowly, a command layered with instinct and bond. Her legs buckled before her mind could resist. She hit the floor. Lucien flinched as if struck. She kneels to pain, not loyalty, he said hoarsely. Even now, her body calls to mine. I marked her, Darius snapped. Thrice. She is bound to this throne. Lucien's laugh was bitter ice. You can scar her all you want. She still moans my name when the fever takes her. Gasps echoed in the chamber. Rhys moved to draw his blade. Alden raised a hand to stop him. This cannot be settled by dominance alone, the priest said gravely. It must be judged by blood. Marin stepped forward, robes rustling. Let her choose. Here. Now. Let the mate decide between the kings. The hall fell into a silence so dense it rang. Evienne rose slowly. Her legs shook. Her skin shimmered with sweat. Her lips parted, but no words emerged. Her vision dimmed. Evienne? Darius said sharply. She staggered. Lucien started forward. No. Then she collapsed, blood blooming from the twin scars on her neck. Her body convulsed once, then stilled. Screams rose. Medic! Darius bellowed. No! Lucien shouted, shoving past Rhys. Dr. Lenia was already running, skirts hiked high, fingers glowing with healer's frost light. She's burning, she gasped, feeling the girl's pulse stutter. The marks, they're rejecting each other. They're killing her. Lucien fell to his knees beside the body. She can't die, he whispered. She's trying to, Darius said hollowly, to stop the pull tearing her in half. A sudden silence fell. Then, from Evienne's chest, a sound. Thump. Again. Thump thump. The fetal heartbeat. Her eyes snapped open. But the gaze that met theirs wasn't Evienne's. You both, she said in a voice layered with something not her own, are unworthy. The frost light pulsed around her. Then exploded. Chapter 14. In the shatter between two souls. The chamber held its breath. Above the marble basin of the spirit pool, Evienne's body floated weightless, barely more than bone and flickering soul. Her hair drifted around her like ash in water, the silver streaks glowing faintly, threads of her unraveling spirit. Her skin glistened with fevered sweat, neck swollen where two marks, Darius's bite on the left, Lucien's on the right, burned like searing brands, weeping crimson. She was dying. Darius stood at the pool's edge, his hands balled into fists, jaw clenched tight enough to crack. Ice had begun to creep up his boots from the runes carved into the stone floor, his beast form roiling just beneath his skin. Lenia whispered calming incantations beside him, but they bounced off his rage like snowfall on steel. Lucien was already in the pool. Kneeling waist deep, his palms hovered just inches from her face. His shirt was gone, chest scarred from battles both new and old. His breath fogged in the bitter air, but he seemed unaware of the cold. All his warmth, all his fury, was focused on her. His voice broke the silence again, raw from repetition. "Evienne, Evienne, come back." A soft noise escaped her lips, not a word, just a whimper. But her lashes trembled. "She heard me." Lucien's voice was reverent, cracked. "She's still in there." "She's in pain," Darius snapped. "Your presence worsens it. You locked her in a palace." "I followed her into the fire," Lucien growled, lifting his gaze. "I'll tear my soul open before I let her go." A surge of tension fractured the chamber. The spirit pool, sacred and ancient, began to hum. The water rippled around Evienne's frame, echoing her heartbeat, faint, then faltering. "She's caught between us," Lenia whispered. "Her body can't hold two claims. If this continues, she'll break." Mera choked from the shadows, eyes wet. "She'll choose death before either of you." Evienne's back arched. Her scream was silent, but the air trembled with it. Both alpha instincts reacted. Darius surged forward, his arm sweeping over her to trap the mark on her neck, ice lacing his fingers. Lucien grabbed her wrist, pressing her hand to his chest, trying to flood her with his bond, his scent, his desperate, burning plea. In her mind, it was worse. A torn void where she stood in a winter forest, blindfolded by fate, limbs pulled in opposite directions. Lucien's voice whispered to the left, wild and broken. Darius's to the right, low and commanding. Her arms were stretched so far her shoulders cracked, knees buckled, mouth opened on a sob that didn't belong to any world. "Let me go," she begged. "Please, let me go." In the real world, her body convulsed. Blood seeped from the marks on her neck in two perfect trails, each curving like a lover's finger down her collarbones. Her skin was impossibly pale now, soaked and fever-bright, and her lips moved, barely. "If I die," she whispered aloud, "will you stop fighting over me?" Lucien went still. Darius flinched as though struck. She turned her head slowly, as if every movement cut her from within, and met Darius's eyes first. His control cracked then, only for a heartbeat, but it was enough. Enough for pain to surface in that icy stare. Enough to see not the Wolf King, but the boy who had buried too many mates beneath moonlit stone. Then she looked at Lucien. And her tears fell. "You still hurt," she murmured. Lucien shook his head. "No, not if you come back." "I hurt you," she corrected. And then she screamed. Not in words. Not in memory. It was a sound that split soul from flesh, that made the high stones of the sanctuary moan and the ice laced in the pool shatter into spirals of crystal. She thrashed in the water. Her chest arched skyward, eyes wide open, glowing white. And from within her womb, a second heartbeat surged. It was not faint. It was not human. The beat thundered like war drums, resonating with something beneath the altar, something old. The runes flared. The blood in the pool began to churn. "Lenia," Mera gasped, backing away. "What's happening to her?" "She's awakening," the healer whispered, throat tight. "But it's not just her." Evienne's mouth opened again, but her voice had changed. Low. Timeless. Not hers. You were warned, it said, and still, you chained the tide. Darius staggered back. Lucien's hands dropped. The runes glowed black. Evienne's hair billowed upward, silver now threaded with something darker, something ancient. Around her, the air grew heavy, thick with the scent of burning salt and ancient ash. Her eyes turned to Darius. Then to Lucien. You both took, she said, not angrily, but like a sentence passed down from some high place. Now give. What are you? Mara breathed. Evienne smiled then. A small, sad thing. Her lips barely moved. I was only ever meant to hold him. Then her body went limp. The runes shattered. The pool fell silent. But from within her belly, the heartbeat continued, loud and steady. Chapter 15. The night before the break. She awoke to silence, but it was not peace. The first face Evienne saw was Darius's. His hand hovered over hers, as if afraid the slightest touch would crack her open again. She flinched before he even reached her. That was all it took. The Wolf King, who had once torn open cities for her, recoiled. Evienne sat upright in the bed, white sheets clinging to her like sea foam to a drowning shore. Her eyes moved slowly to the corners of the room, not frantic, not searching. Watching. Assessing. Judging. Darius stayed kneeling by her side, one hand clenched tight at his thigh. He didn't speak. Neither did she. For hours, she said nothing. She had changed. Something in her stillness was louder than screams. When Rhys entered with broth and whispered something about healers, she didn't look at him. When Mara hovered, nervously adjusting pillows, Evienne didn't blink. Even when Alden's robes swept into the chamber, carrying with them incense and prayer and something sharper, fear, she remained unmoved. A doll cracked just enough to begin observing its puppeteers. At dusk, Darius brought her to the Moonwatch balcony. He didn't offer his hand. She didn't ask for it. The frostbitten winds tore at her gown, but she made no sound. She simply leaned on the stone balustrade and stared into the violet fog blanketing Duskwatch Hollow. You haven't eaten, he said. I'm not hungry, she replied, voice low, mechanical. I thought, when you woke, you might ask for me, he said, softer now, unsure why he bled his heart to someone who barely breathed. Evienne turned her head. Her eyes were silvered over with moonlight, distant and glassy. I did. But you weren't here. His throat worked. You never are. That night, she did not sleep. And when the guards changed at midnight, Lucien came. He did not sneak in like a thief. He walked through the cold halls as if the stone welcomed his rebellion. Silas had whispered to him through the rebellion's fractured tunnels, she's changed. But she's awake. He waited until the torchlights outside her door flickered blue, his signal, and then stepped inside. Evienne was seated on the bed, hair unbound, still as water in a sealed jar. She didn't startle when he entered. She only looked up and tilted her head. Lucien didn't smile. He hadn't since the night he'd carried her from the caves like a corpse too light for the dead. I came to see if you were still you. I'm not. Evienne. You want something from me too. She rose slowly, feet bare against the cold stone. Her nightdress shifted like breath. You just don't use chains. He flinched as if struck. That's not fair. It's the only fair thing left, she whispered, stepping closer. Her voice was sharper than he'd ever heard it. No longer trembling. You burned for me. But did you ever ask if I wanted to be firewood? He looked as if he might reach for her, then thought better. She watched him the whole time, arms limp at her sides. I would let you go, he said finally. If you asked me to. You all say that, she said, stepping past him to the window. And yet I'm still here. In the flickering light, Lucien saw the shadow of a wound still healing on her chest, a faint welt in the shape of the twin mark seal. Her bond. His bond. I would tear it out of you myself, he said, voice shaking, if it meant you could breathe again. Evienne turned slowly. And if I die without it? Lucien didn't answer. He couldn't. Later, Silas came to her through a servant's corridor only he still remembered. His smile was faint, his cloak damp with cave moss. Pretty little ghost, he murmured as he sat by her fire. The rebellion's whispering your name again. I never asked for it. They never do, Silas said. But the Western pacts have broken from the council. Darius's grip is slipping, and Lucien's rising like a storm he swore he'd never be. You stand between them. Still. She looked at him without fear. Why come to me, Silas? Because I've seen what happens when men like them win. He leaned forward. But I wonder what happens if you stop letting them. She stared at the flames. If the throne collapses, do I get to be free? He didn't smile. He didn't lie. Maybe. Or maybe you get to rebuild it in your name. She laughed once, quiet, bitter. You think I want a crown? No, he said gently. I think you want a door. And there's one carved in blood just outside this room. When she was alone again, Evienne stood before the tall, moon-carved mirror. She touched her skin where the bond used to pulse. Her eyes gleamed, not with tears, but clarity. That night, the moons rose full and twin and unyielding. Evienne walked barefoot through the black halls of the palace. No one stopped her. Or maybe they did not see her, just a whisper cloaked in white and frost. She reached the Moonwatch balcony alone. No Darius. No Lucien. Just the sky. Just the altar where vows were first whispered to gods that no longer listened. She knelt before the stone basin carved with the symbol of the old soul oaths. Her trembling hands peeled back the nightdress, revealing the mark at her chest. With a shard of obsidian kept since the mountain caves, she slit the skin above her heart. Blood spilled. Red, then silver. She pressed both palms to the basin and whispered, "Take it. Take all of it." The stone pulsed once. Then again. And the stars above blinked out for a breathless moment. In the silence that followed, a howl, not of wolves, but of something older, rippled through the hollow. Behind her, a door slammed open. But Evienne didn't turn. Chapter 16, The Stone That Binds. The moon hung low and swollen over Duskwatch Hollow, casting twin rings of pale fire across the shrine's frost-slicked stone. Evienne stood barefoot in the courtyard of the Soulstone Temple, her breath white against the night. The sacred altar loomed before her, black and ancient, slick with generations of dried blood. No priest had lit its braziers in 100 years, yet its heart still pulsed, as if remembering every oath ever broken. She unfastened the laces of her shift with trembling hands. The fabric slipped from her shoulders like a ghost shedding skin, revealing her chest and the silvered scar that marked where Darius had claimed her, where Lucien's fire had tried to replace it. Her pulse throbbed beneath her sternum, wild and terrified. But her grip did not waver as she drew the ceremonial dagger across her skin. Blood welled red-black under the moonlight. She fell to her knees and pressed both palms against the soulstone. "I unbind," she whispered. "I surrender. I sever." The stone flared. First silver, then violet, then deep, suffocating black. Fire burst upward, not warm but cold, biting, clinging to her ribs like chains of frost. Her breath caught. Pain bloomed, pure, old, unbearable. Something beneath her skin cracked and howled. "Evienne!" Darius's voice shattered the silence like thunder. She turned, barely conscious, to see him storming across the courtyard, eyes glowing gold with fury. He was already bleeding from the knuckles where he had torn through the temple doors. Reese followed at a distance, weaponless, silent. "Stop! Stop this madness!" Darius's hands found her shoulders, dragging her away from the stone. Her blood smeared across his palms. "You dare try to escape from me? From what we are?" She didn't flinch, only blinked slowly through the haze. "I'm not yours," she murmured, voice as soft as falling ash. "I was never meant to belong. You think you can bleed yourself free?" He shook her, his hands rough. "You think I will let you die just to prove some foolish point about fate?" "I'd rather die," she said, "than wake up inside your prison." Lucien's voice came then, hoarse, quiet, from the shadows beyond the shrine gates. "Then let her go." Darius turned. "You dare." But Lucien wasn't looking at him. He walked past, toward the altar, bloodless and slow, like a man walking to his own grave. He knelt before the soul stone and pressed his forehead to the base. "I came to stop her," he said. "But if she no longer wants me, I won't cage her either." A pause, then, "I release you, Evienne. Even if it tears me open." The wind screamed through the temple. The fire from the soul stone reared higher, black tongues licking toward the sky. Evienne curled in on herself, chest heaving, blood pooling beneath her. Her body was convulsing with the backlash of the ritual. Too much, too fast. A vessel never meant to hold so many tethers. "Please," she whispered, barely audible. "I don't want to be a bond. I just want to be." Darius dropped to his knees beside her. He cupped the back of her head with trembling fingers. "If you die," he said, voice raw, "I will burn this kingdom down to ash." Her lips parted. She tried to speak, but the fire inside her surged, heatless, merciless, ancient. Then it happened. The soul stone erupted in dark flame, not fire but something denser, a writhing obsidian storm that wrapped around her form. Her veins lit from within, her eyes snapping open with a jolt that silenced even the wind. A ring of light spun out from her body, cracking the stone beneath them. Alden stumbled into the chamber, out of breath, robes half undone. "Stop," he shouted. "Don't touch her." Darius turned, growling. "She's dying." "No, she's becoming." Everyone froze. Alden dropped to his knees, eyes wide with something like horror or reverence. "She's not just a bonded. She's not even a maid anymore. She's a vessel," he whispered. "A twin soul." The echo of the lost moon. Silence rang out like a bell. Lucien stepped back. Darius stared at Evienne's glowing form, now suspended just inches above the cracked altar. Her blood trailed through the air like ink in water. "She's the last," Alden said. "The last remnant of the bloodline that could unmake our laws. The old power, it chose her." Reese, still silent, lowered his head. Elder Marin appeared behind him, pale and furious, but even she dared not speak. Evienne finally opened her eyes again. They were silver and black, no longer human, no longer merely wolf. She looked at both alphas before her, bleeding and broken, and said nothing. The fire around her pulsed once, then vanished. She collapsed into Darius's arms. And somewhere far beneath the shrine, in the catacombs of forgotten vows, a long-buried chain snapped. Chapter 17, The Wolf King Burns. The tower room was quiet, but not still. The hush was the kind that bruised, too soft, too thick, like snow pressing against glass. Wind moaned at the eaves, but no sound entered the high chamber where Evienne lay curled on the velvet settee, like something brittle and forgotten. She had not spoken since the shrine. Not since the blood on the stone, the scream she hadn't made, the alpha who had dragged her back by her pulse and not her name. Darius sat across from her, a bowl of untouched broth cooling in his hands. His fingers, always steady, now trembled faintly as he stirred without purpose. The scar at his temple, earned in silence long before her arrival, seemed starker in the gloom. "You have to eat something," he said finally, voice rasping like bark stripped bare. This isn't punishment. Evienne didn't move. The tower was the highest in the palace. No guards outside. No locks. Just his presence. Just his eyes when she dared meet them. "You'll fade," he whispered. "And I don't know how to stop it this time." She turned her face away. For a moment, the Wolf King only sat there, watching her. Then he crossed the space between them and knelt, setting the bowl aside. He lifted the spoon himself, dipped it, raised it to her lips. She didn't open her mouth. He waited. Finally, her breath caught, barely, and she took a sip. Just one. Just enough. Darius exhaled like a man saved from drowning. He smoothed a hand across her wrist, thumb grazing the inside like he'd once memorized her lifeline there. "I don't know how to love without caging," he said softly. "They raised me to conquer, not to keep safe. I was given a crown before I understood what it meant to hold a hand gently." She closed her eyes. He brushed a strand of silvered hair from her face. But if you must hate me, then let this child, let him not carry my shape. Her eyes opened. Just a sliver. Her lips parted, not for speech, but for breath that tasted like thawed sorrow. Darius stood. Slowly. Like his bones had grown heavier. He crossed to the door and paused, hand on the frame. Don't run again, he said, not with threat, but ache. You don't need to run. I'm already gone. The council hall was colder than the tower. Darius walked the length of it without the silver cloak of the throne. His shirt was unfastened at the throat, his hands bare. Mara flinched when she saw him. Reese stood like stone beside the dais, expression unreadable as ever. The elders turned to see their king approach, but it was Elder Marin who first narrowed his eyes. You're late to this assembly, Baylor. I am no longer king, Darius said, his voice loud in the silence. I come as nothing more than a man who has broken what he was never meant to hold. A ripple passed through the circle. Whispered outrage. Disbelief. Mara's hand rose to her chest. Darius unfastened the iron ring from his finger and let it fall to the floor with a cold clink. Then came the wolfbone circlet. It landed heavier. She was never a possession. Not a mate. Not a tethered fate. Just a girl caught in the teeth of a world that wanted to own her soul. Marin stood abruptly. You will destabilize the hollow. I already did, Darius said. I shackled the one light we had to my own ruin. You would leave us for a human? One elder spat. I would leave so she could live. Darius turned toward Reese. No more wars, Commander. No more claiming. The bloodlines end here, or they end in ash. He walked from the chamber without looking back. The howls that rose from the cliffs that night were not those of war, but mourning. Evienne woke sometime near dawn. Or what passed for it in Duskwatch, just a paler kind of dusk. She reached for the side of the bed out of instinct. Found it cold. Empty. A folded slip of parchment sat on the pillow where his scent still lingered. Not strong. Just a trace. Salt and smoke and something older than both. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the note. My ambition is only your freedom now. The breath left her lungs like glass shattering. He hadn't just left her. He had vanished. She sat very still for a long time, staring at the ink as if it would change. But the words did not move. Did not fade. Only pressed themselves deeper into her skin, as if they'd been carved there all along. When the pain came, it was slow at first, an ache that gathered behind her navel, then spread like fire wrapped in silk. Evienne doubled over, gasping. Her fingers clawed the sheets. A heat bloomed down her spine, sacred, wild, and wrong. She wasn't alone. She screamed, once, sharp, silent. The bond inside her flared, then shattered. And still, the pain grew. The last thing she saw before the world fractured was the twin moons above the balcony, hanging low and watching. Unblinking. And beneath them, a child not yet born pressed his presence through her veins. She did not know whose blood he would bear, only that he would be free. Chapter 18. The Child of Moon and Ruin. The shrine walls dripped with condensation, though no water flowed. The torches burned cold, their light a colorless shimmer that wavered against blackstone veined with bone-white sigils. The shrine of soul birth was ancient, older than the throne, older than even the first Howl carved into legend, and tonight, it awakened with the scent of blood and fate. Evienne lay on the stone slab at the heart of the altar. Her skin, slick with sweat and blood, glistened silver under the twin moon glow pouring through the open dome above. Her back arched with a silent scream, lips parted but soundless, her voice already lost hours ago, along with too much blood. Her pulse is fading, Lenia murmured, crouched beside her with trembling hands. This isn't just physical, something's pulling her under. She's closing herself off, Silas muttered, crouched at the outer edge of the shrine. I can't feel her. She's not just unconscious, she's gone. She refuses the bond, Alden said, grim and certain. All of them. No alpha can touch her mind now. She's cast it all out. Lucien staggered into the circle, barefoot, bare-chested, smeared with soot and moon ash. His eyes were bloodshot, his breathing ragged as if he'd been running for days. He collapsed beside Evienne and took her hand, fingers slipping through her icy grasp. "No," he growled. "No, no, no, you don't shut me out now. You don't die now. You don't leave me with nothing." She didn't stir. "Let me in," he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. "Please. I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you never speak my name again. Just don't disappear." Her body convulsed, and Lenia shouted, "It's starting, she's pushing, but the rhythms are wrong. It's too early. He's coming now." Lucien's body shuddered, the bond erupting with static pain. Across the hollow, wolves fell to their knees. Alphas gasped in agony as a shockwave of spiritual resonance cracked through the ancient oaths. It wasn't the child. It was her. Evienne's rejection of every tether, of every thread fate tried to stitch through her soul, was splintering the very architecture of command. Elder Marin clutched the altar's rail with white knuckles, his voice barely audible above the screams. "She's breaking the binding. No child born like this should survive. This is not your prophecy to decide." Lenia snarled. Evienne's breath came in tearing gasps, then stopped. Silas shouted something, but it drowned in Lucien's raw roar, wordless, helpless, as he felt her vanish from their link, her consciousness curling inward and away, like a dying star retreating into collapse. The shrine darkened. Not from shadow, but from silence. A vast, suffocating stillness descended. Then, a sound. Not a cry. A pulse. A wet gasp, tiny and stubborn, slicing through the silence like a shard of light. The child had been born. Lucien stared in disbelief as Lenia lifted the small, blood-slicked figure from between Evienne's thighs. The boy was limp for a breath, too, then let out a guttural wail that wasn't human, wasn't wolf. It was other. Unclaimed. Unmarked. Lenia turned, her voice shaking. "He lives. But he's untouched." The boy's eyes blinked open. Pale. Silver. And beneath the silver, slivers of moonlight. One eye like Darius's. The other unmistakably Lucien's. Lucien reached for him. The child did not flinch. But the instant Lucien touched his skin, the bond recoiled. It was like being rejected by a god. He reeled back, clutching his chest. "He didn't choose me." A moment later, Alden stepped forward, cautious. "Then perhaps the Wolf King." Lenia passed the child to Lucien before the priest could move. "He doesn't belong to your altar, Alden." Lucien knelt beside Evienne again, the child in his arms, blood and milk sent thick between them. He looked at her still body, unmoving. Then down at the infant, who looked back at him with unnerving calm. "He didn't choose me," Lucien said again, hoarsely. "He didn't choose you either." He pressed his forehead to the boy's. "He chose no one." Evienne floated. Not in warmth, but in absence. In a place beyond touch. Beyond oath. Beyond need. The pain had stopped. Her breath, too, it seemed. But something small and alive moved through the fog of her senses. A cry. Not of agony, but of defiance. A scream that tore through the bone-deep silence. Her body felt like glass. But her soul, it reached. Her eyes opened. Just barely. She saw a blur of silver, the curve of a cheek smeared with her blood. The child. Her son. He gasped once more, lungs full of air. And she smiled. Not for them. Not for the men who had torn her between them. But for him. "You're free," she whispered, voice cracked like winter branches. "I'm, finally, not someone's anymore." Her chest lifted, once. Then fell. Her eyes did not close. They only stared. At the moons. At the child. At the ruin she had birthed. A new world, blood-wrapped and screaming. Chapter 19. To love what cannot stay. The silence within the sanctum of Last Vow was not empty. It pressed against stone and skin alike, thick as the mist that clung to Duskwatch Hollow's breathless dawns. The sacred chamber, carved into the cliffside beneath the moonbind citadel, had once heard the oaths of kings and the blood-pledged sobs of mates torn apart. Now it held only the quiet ache of something almost, but not quite, lost. Evienne lay in the center of the sanctum's high chamber, a human thread between old magic and something newer still, her hair like a spill of silver ash across the altar of woven moonroot linens. Her chest rose and fell, barely. Her lips held no sound. No breath of command stirred through the soul marks on her skin. She had not spoken since the birth. 3 days had passed. The child had come screaming into the world beneath the twin moons, his first breath cracking the runes etched into the temple walls. And she had not opened her eyes since. Darius sat beside her, no longer cloaked in the cold finery of the Wolf King. His shoulders were bare beneath a simple wool tunic, and the rings that once adorned his fingers, symbols of conquest, of power, of control, were folded neatly in a bowl of melted snow beside the cot. His hair was unbound, braided only loosely at the temple, like a warrior before execution. Each morning, he brought warm broth in silence. Each night, he folded fresh linens beneath her body with hands that had once wrung the life from traitors. He never asked her to wake. He did not beg the gods or her soul, or the tether between them to stir. Not aloud. But he watched her. Her hands lay still atop the blanket. Once, they had trembled beneath his mouth. Once, they had struck him across the face. Now they curled inward, as if even her fingers could not bear the memory of belonging. He dipped a cloth into the bowl, wiping the sweat from her brow with reverence. "You don't owe me a word," he said hoarsely. "Not even breath." The torchlight from the far wall guttered in time with his voice. Beyond the stained glass, the storm had ended. Only wind remained, rustling against the high arches like breath in the lungs of something dead. "If you wake," Darius whispered, brushing her temple with the back of his fingers, "I will not touch you again. Not unless you ask. Not unless you say it." He bent low, voice cracking open. "I only want one thing, Evienne. One thing." Her chest rose, slow and shuddering. But she did not stir. "Tell me you don't hate me." And then, nothing. Stillness. His hands fell to his knees. His eyes shut. She did not answer. Not in sound. Not yet. Lucien arrived at twilight on the 4th day, his boots still damp with northern snow. Silas walked behind him in uncharacteristic silence, holding a small cloth-wrapped bundle to his chest. The child stirred once, faintly. Lenia met them at the threshold. Her sleeves were stained with dried salves, and her voice had been roughened by long nights and unshed tears. "She's unchanged," the healer said gently, glancing at Lucien. "No fever. No decline. Just no light." Lucien nodded once. His eyes were hollow, too full to be angry. "I know," he murmured. "I felt it." Lenia stepped aside, but Silas lingered behind, biting the inside of his cheek. "She doesn't want to be found," he said softly to Lucien's back. "Even in sleep. You can feel it too, can't you?" Lucien didn't reply. He walked past Darius, who sat unmoving in the shadowed alcove, and approached the edge of the cot. Evienne's face was unchanged. Her skin had regained some color, but her spirit was a smothered ember, alive, but sealed behind glass. Lucien looked down at her and let out a breath like something broken. "I brought him," he said. He knelt, shifting the blanket aside, and placed the bundle in the crook of her arm. The baby stirred. He had silver lashes and dark hair like fire-burnt ash. His eyes, when they fluttered open, held a shade Lucien had never seen in another living thing. Twin moon silver. Unclaimed. Unclaimed. The soul bond had chosen no alpha. Neither Lucien. Nor Darius. Lucien laughed softly. It cracked like bone. "He didn't choose me," he whispered. "Didn't choose him either." He looked over his shoulder at Darius, who met his gaze in silence. Not with hatred. Not even bitterness. Only the dull familiarity of men standing in the same burning wreckage. Lucien's hand found Evienne's. It was still cold. "I want to be angry," he murmured to her. "I want to demand why you'd rather stay in that silence than come back to us." He leaned in, forehead nearly brushing hers. "But the truth is, I understand." The words trembled against the hush. "I'm your pain made flesh, aren't I?" Lucien looked to the infant again. "He's your pain's beginning." He smiled, ragged and thin. "Maybe he's the end too." He gathered the child back into his arms. The babe made no protest, eyes heavy with sleep. Lucien kissed Evienne's forehead, lips soft as regret. "If I look at you again," he whispered, "I won't leave." He stood. And this time, he didn't look back. The sanctum fell into hush again. Darius remained. He no longer spoke, no longer reached for her. He simply watched, night after night, as the candle at her bedside burned down and the frost retook the windows. He began to think she had truly left. Until a sound. Barely more than breath. No words. Just the whisper of skin against linen. Darius sat upright. His hand reached instinctively for the edge of the cot, but he stilled it, heart pounding too loudly. Her hand. Evienne's fingers had moved. Only a twitch. A flutter. But it was there. She was still here. She had not left. But she was not ready to return. Chapter 20. The Mother Without a Crown. It was dawn when Evienne woke, and no one saw her do it. The sanctum of last vow was silent as ever, abandoned in its grief, and too sacred for morning footsteps. Pale winter light spilled across the stone floor, catching the curve of her cheek, her lashes, the hollow beneath her collarbone. She did not gasp or cry or tremble. She simply sat up. The linens fell from her shoulders like forgotten snow. Her hands found her belly first. Flat now. Empty. Her skin was whole, but the markings of the bond, Darius's command, Lucien's rebellion, the echoes of their power and desire, were nothing more than dusted whispers across her ribs. Faint. Dim, silent. Evienne pressed her palm to her heart. It beat slow. Steady. But not for anyone. The soul mark no longer sang. She climbed from the cot barefoot, and the floor was bitterly cold. Her steps echoed like footsteps down a hollow corridor of memory, and not a soul stirred as she pushed open the doors that once sealed her in with kings and wolves and fate. No guards. No servants. No throne. The palace had gone quiet. The moonlight hall, once lit with gold-veined torches and trembling howls, stood in ruinous stillness. A broken crown lay on the edge of a toppled stone basin, tangled in frostbitten moss. No one had claimed it. Evienne did not. She wandered its corridors with the air of a ghost who had died inside its walls long before her body fell. The mirrored gallery showed her reflection, gaunt and pale, her long silver hair unbraided, her robes clinging loosely as if afraid of her new emptiness. When she reached the music room, she paused. The old piano remained untouched. Half of its keys had warped in the last fire. The sheet music, faded and torn, was still open to the song she had once played for Darius, for Lucien, for herself when she could not speak. Her fingers hovered over the ivory edge. Then she sat. And played. Notes, soft and fragile, slipped into the silence like moths daring the sun. The chords wavered at first, uncertain, cracked, but they found form. They whispered of a love that had been drowned and still left salt behind. Of a cradle never held. Of a woman who had chosen nothing, yet lost everything anyway. Tears welled, then fell. Not out of anguish, but because there was no one left to wipe them. When the last note faded, she whispered to her reflection in the broken mirror across the room. If I could begin again, I'd kneel once more, just never look up to love. Later, in the abandoned nursery, she found no trace of her child. The cradle was gone. The blankets were gone. Only the faint scent of lavender and salt lingered in the air, and Evienne stood there for a long time, letting it wash over her like an unspoken lullaby. A sound behind her. The hush of leather boots. Silas leaned in the doorway, arms folded, his coat dusted with road snow. He said nothing at first. Just watched her with a mixture of amusement and pity. "You woke," he said eventually. Evienne did not turn. "Where is he?" Silas sighed and walked inside. "North," he said. beyond the veil. With someone who can keep him hidden. Keep him safe. She gripped the windowsill. He's mine. No, Silas said, voice soft. He'll remember you. But he doesn't belong to you. She shut her eyes. I didn't even hold him. Silas looked away. I think that's what you wanted. Then. And now? You're asking the wrong man, Evienne. Her shoulders rose, then fell. A long pause. Did Darius send you? She asked. He reached into his coat and handed her a sealed letter. He left this. She broke the wax with trembling fingers. The parchment inside was worn and smudged at the edges, as if it had been opened a dozen times before being sent. She read it aloud, because she couldn't trust herself to hold the words in silence. I named him Thorn. Not for you to forgive me, but so I never forget. He is my only regret. But you are my only truth. Evienne pressed the paper to her chest. Silas said nothing more. When he left, he shut the door quietly behind him. She packed that night, not with the dignity of a fallen queen nor the desperation of a grieving mother. Just a woman without use for mirrors anymore. No crown, no claim. Only silence in her steps and ash in her blood. She left behind her comb, her velvet slippers, her bridal robes. She folded them neatly on the bed beside the window that once held moonlight. She wore simple grays now, travel clothes that did not bear the mark of any house or mate or god. And at dawn, before anyone knew she'd left, she stepped onto the silent terrace. Below, the ashen veil stretched wild and unending. Wind howled over the crags, and no wolf called her name. Evienne did not flinch. She walked forward. And thus began the tale of the moon-forsaken mother, one who bore the soul mark, the crown, and the curse, but chose to leave them all behind. Chapter 21. Beneath the Wolf King's Moon. Snow fell in whispers. On the ridge above the forgotten pass, where no road dared carve itself into permanence and no beast howled twice from the same place, a woman walked alone. Her hair, once silver bright, now darkened with ash and time, twisted in long braids that hung over her shoulder like cords of memory. She wore no furs, only a worn traveler's cloak the color of moonstone and blood long dried. Her boots had been mended a dozen times, her hands calloused from axe and fire, not harp or prayer. But her eyes, those still held storms. Years had passed since she stepped from the silent terrace and never looked back. In that time, she had crossed plains where bones whispered beneath the snow, valleys where wolves waited not to devour her, but to kneel. She had no mark, no bond, no chain of scent or spell to bind her will. And so they called her Wolf Speaker. Some said she had tamed rabid alphas in mid-frenzy with a look. Others swore she sang the names of the dead to the mountains and they listened. But none dared follow her too long. There was something in her stillness more dangerous than any bite. At dusk, Evienne stood by the edge of a half-buried cairn, fingers tracing the icy stones. A small offering lay beneath it, rabbit bones, a woven charm, a strip of red cloth tied in a knot she knew too well. Not his. Not Lucien's either. But a child's. And she had heard the rumors. They came on wind whispers and fire circle tales. Of a boy born with dusk in one eye and firelight in the other. Of a child who could command twin wolves at will, never broken by oath, never silenced by howl. Thorn. She had not sought him. Not once. Not even when the ache gnawed her bones in the quietest hours. He was alive. Safe. That was enough. But sometimes on nights like this, she let herself wonder, had he inherited her silence? Or Darius's restraint? Lucien's wildfire? Or something wholly his own? She hoped it was the last. As moonrise came, Evienne climbed Snowlight Ridge. Her breath curled in white streamers. The twin moons, Arden and Sereth, rose like silver ghosts over the white horizon, casting her shadow long and thin across the untouched snow. A wolf's howl echoed faintly from the pass below. Her hand found the chain at her throat. A single ring hung there, worn, dulled, the inscription nearly rubbed away. She didn't wear it on her finger. Hadn't for years. But she hadn't buried it either. She touched its edge now and closed her eyes. And when the wind shifted, she saw them. Darius, outlined in moonlight, eyes fierce even when he softened for her. The way his hand used to shake when he brushed her cheek, though no one ever saw it but her. Lucien, laughing and bleeding, drunk on fire and hunger, kneeling only once, in that ruined hall with her name on his tongue. Neither image hurt anymore. They simply existed. Proof that she had once been seen. But not owned. Never again. She opened her eyes and lifted her face to the sky. The snow glittered like scattered stars. In the vast silence, she whispered, "They all say I was loved to ruin. But all I ever wanted was to live one night that was mine." Another howl rose then. Closer. She could not say if it came from past or future, man or beast, loss or promise. She only smiled. And turned away from it. When she returned to her shelter beneath the ridge, she lit a fire. Sat beside it. Watched the flame take hold. The heat cracked the frost on her fingers. She took the ring from her throat and turned it slowly between her fingers. The engraving inside had faded. But if she squinted just right, she could still trace the words. Yours. Once. Never again. Evienne closed her hand around it. And for the first time in years, she slept. Dreamless. Free.